Yeah, so you're looking at 10.8, 10.9 per 100 and it's like, that's not slow.
That looks close for lame. Right, you're shaking your head. For track, it's like, dude, you are light years behind. That's not close at all. And I felt something just pop in my right foot. My skate's right here.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
there's no motion in these things, man. Zero.
No. Life going forward is a mystery. In reverse, looking back, it's a science. And so, in some sense, I didn't come up with that, but like, what happened afterwards, so we can look at observations and draw data points. And history is something that's written retroactively.
If you don't know who Graham Tuttle is, you've been sleeping under a rock. Known as the Barefoot Sprinter on YouTube, Instagram, and all the socials, Graham has been reuniting clients and viewers, including myself, with our innate ability to manifest athleticism with unbridled grace and fluidity. Graham's philosophy views pain as a valuable signal from our bodies telling us something is wrong. Modern shoe technology has allowed us to mask these valuable signals, or worse, actively promote suboptimal body mechanics that systematically can make us weaker and less athletic over time, all in the name of fashion and aesthetics. If you believe the sexiest fashion statement is to have an athletic, well-functioning body, then Graham's content needs to be on your must-watch list. We'll get into Graham's story, what drew him to perfect his craft, and ultimately the components of his business model today. It is my honor to welcome the illustrious Barefoot Sprinter himself, Graham Tuttle, onto the Eden Group podcast. Graham, thank you, sir.
Pleasure to be had. I need you to, I'm going to set up a call with you and my wife so that she can learn to refer to me by these illustrious, graceful words. It would really help my self-esteem.
Awesome, sir.
Kind introduction.
My pleasure. So, Graham, you've delved into your story on various podcasts. I first heard you on Mark Bell's podcast, which is, I'm sure, is how a lot of people came to discover you. It would be great, though, for our viewers to go back to the beginning, where you grew up and what your early life was like.
Well, I East Coast suburb boy, basically. I was born in Georgia, but I didn't really spend much time there. And then I grew up around the Charlotte area of North Carolina. Most of my life, I guess at a younger age, was really confined by glasses. So these little readers I have now, these are just 2X readers. It's part of my process to reclaim my eyesight. I try to avoid wearing them as much as possible. Most of that's just like a psychological thing. But I used to wear my prescription at age of 2. I was put in some glasses that are, if their magnification is 3.5 times magnification, so pretty thick. And then as a kid, you wearing glasses, you don't really develop a lot of depth perception or peripheral vision. So the things that when they start moving fast, you lose a lot of the ability to coordinate athleticism. And so even though I was a little bit of a bigger kid, I was never very coordinated. When things started moving fast, I would shell up and I wasn't able to move very well. So I loved sports, loved running. I hated the sitting still in classrooms. I was smart enough to get by, but every single teacher I had figured I had some form of ADHD and I needed to, be medicated. And so there was this constant friction of like successful in school, but I was just never really enjoyed it. All I wanted to do was run and play, but I was not really athletic enough to be able to make that anything serious. And so I kind of just went through until I kept trying out for sports teams, the tennis team, the basketball team, the football team. I tried out for all of them and didn't make any of them, and ended up in track and cross country because they don't make cuts. And so that was,
Yep.
It worked out well. So 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, I ran track and cross country, but it's not like I was doing, eventually I saw the sprinters and I wanted to be able to do what they were doing. But, you start off with cross country, you get put in the long distance events and track. And that was just kind of a year round thing. So it was basically like my hamster wheel running around the cage was, taking laps around the school. It was good because it got my energy out, but at the same time, I didn't develop any form of like athleticism or coordination. And so it just created this kind of void in a sense where I was, exercising, but I was not developing any sense of connectedness with my body. I was good at suffering. And then I started to lift weights later in high school, and that was very helpful. Just kind of a little exploration on the side and realized I could change my body. But, as far as growing up, it was a lot of that, just wanting to be athletic, wanting to play sports, wanting to be outside, but not really being, if I'd been more athletic, I would have gotten picked up by like a club soccer team or play basketball. But like none of those happened. So I just kind of floated around. So nothing spectacular at all from my childhood, if that makes sense.
What distances in track?
Well, it started off the 2 mile, which, if
geez.
you're familiar with track at all, is the worst event. I mean, I remember there were some days where you'd have like 10 or 11 hour meets on a weekend, and you start there at 8 a.m. in the morning, and then you're getting there, and all the way at the very second to last event is the 2 mile, and you get these skinny kids that get on there and it's just 8 laps, and they're not the athletic ones. Of course, there's like, even if there are a handful of kids who can do like a 10 or 11 minute, 2 mile,
Yeah.
there's going to be a handful of kids that are doing the 13, 14 minutes. You're sitting there, you're waiting. Everyone wants to go home. And of course, you have the 4x4
A
right
four
after.
by four.
That was the
Yeah.
most fun. So that's what I wanted to do. So I was always watching that. And so slowly every year I got a little bit better, a little bit faster. But, no one's encouraging a 2 miler to go try for the 4x4. And it's just unheard of. But that was what I wanted to do. So I kept working a little bit more to go a little faster. And I was able my senior year to be the alternate for the 4x4, which was a big progression for me. So yeah, I did a lot of them, but the closest I ever got to any type of sprinting was the 4x4.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is the funnest race on the track. How often did you run the 8?
The 800.
Yeah.
That was when the 4x8. I was not fast enough. Some of my friends were able to do the 800 because they'd be below 2 minutes. But 4x8, I was able to sneak on, which was what created this horrible thing because the 4x8 was the second or the first event in the day, if I remember correctly. So it's very early on, and then the 2 mile would be the last event, second to last event of the day. But I did the 800 is probably arguably, I don't know, 400's rough, but 800's
No. 800's worse.
Oh my
800's
gosh.
worse. Yeah, it's in my opinion. So I ran the 4 and the 2, and
okay.
I only ran the 8 once or twice in both high school and college, and I
It's rough.
think it's a toss up between the 4 hurdles and the 8 for the worst race on the track.
Yeah. The 800's rough because you finish that first lap and you're just,
Halfway?
I have to do this again.
Halfway. It's
Yeah.
not a like, it's a sprint, especially the
Yeah.
high level. It's
Yeah.
a sprint.
Well, that's one thing I don't think people appreciate about running it. And we talk so much about speed and the difference between sprinting. And yes, there is like mechanical differences of the top guys in terms of their sprinting. But I mean, you look at the world record for the 400s, like 40 point, it's around 40
I think
seconds.
it's like 43. It's like 43.18.
Yeah. So you're looking at 10.8, 10.9 per 100.
Most people
Every
can't do that.
and it's like that's not slow. And even you look at
No.
Kipchoge and his amazing marathon times, and it's like I think there's this loss of perspective that at the top peak of every running capacity, they are fast, really fast. And so it's the difference of like endurance. No, it's like there's slight differences in the capacity, but I mean those differences make fractions of a second. But it is it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny to listen to non-runners evaluate sprinting versus the normal population or even versus other sports. So, huge track and field fan. It's really funny to hear people talk about, let's say, like American football players or soccer players versus track athletes. And the big one in the news, everybody's talking, is Tyreek Hill wants to race Noah Lyles. And whenever it's depicted on TV and people say, "Oh, look how close he is," it's like that looks close. For lame, right? You're shaking your head. For track, it's like, dude, you are light years behind. That's not close at all.
And even the problem is Noah Lyles is a 200 guy. You see, like I think at 40 meters into the last 100 meters, it was a 40. He was the last place. I think maybe up to 60 meters into the 100 meter. Like, yeah, of course Tyreek Hill would either beat him or be close because that's a whole different world. But like, you get a meter beyond that, it's like Noah was accelerating, like unreal. It's crazy. So
yeah, not even close. So I find it very inspiring that you considered yourself so unathletic, because when I discover you, you're like the paragon of athleticism. Right. And so it should be very encouraging for people to view your content and realize, like this is accessible to me too.
Unfortunately, what I've realized is that people don't pay attention till there's something that's noteworthy. And then at that point, it's almost an unwillingness to believe that you were ever any different. And I think one of the reasons, which is a blessing and a curse, is I don't get I don't have a draw that gets a lot of professional athletes. I have some friends who have, I don't know, fraction of the reach, so to speak, of my audience, but they have all professional athletes that we've both heard of that'll reach out to them and want to work with them. And it's like, I think I have more of an appeal, whereas I'm not so advanced that people would say that guy is born with, no one's ever blessed me or like, no one's ever accused me of using steroids or being born with natural gifted things, but like I can manage it. So there's a level of, I could see that's within reach, but at the same time, it's not like, it's a blessing and a curse in some sense. So I just own that in the sense of like, if you could see where I came from, I was had the opportunity to do a podcast with one of my early coaches and early mentors. There's a professional professor of mine in college, and he was the first guy who really taught me how to lift and jump and do stuff. And we were laughing because he was like, I had never seen somebody jump so badly, as badly as you. And this is like in college. And so really, most of the stuff is, I think at this point, is like trying to be a testament to like, and we could talk a little bit about like what it means to be a hybrid athlete, but in some senses, like, there's so many like people have these ideas, fixed mindset about what you can do with your body and what's off limits. And it's like, well, I think there's a lot more on the table if you're willing to put your intention and focus into something fully. And even more so as an adult, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's like, it's not really true. But I think the more people see that as like a lived example, then, there's value there.
Yeah. It's not an accident then that we're connected through Ben Patrick's community, because Ben Patrick is very similar, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. It's like, at least in his own story, like the consummate non-athlete who's like doing amazing windmill dunks and front splits. And it's like, wait, what? So this can be acquired through persistence and intelligent training and hard work and patience.
So I think specifically with that, it's like I've recently really focused on my mobility and gymnastic skills and calisthenics, because there's a bit. So my wife is a gymnastics coach, and she works with gymnastics. What do you call those? Gymnasts. And so I'll go, and they have an adult gym, and I'll go spend time with these people, and they're just doing unreal things. And there is a point where, am I going to be able to do a full giant, which is where they have like the bar, they swing and do like a full circle all the way around the bar. In some of these amazing parallel bar things where they're swinging, they do a somersault or a flip off the bars. Probably not. And I think so if I think about it a little bit more directly, things like endurance running and heavy lifting have a bigger draw to people because they feel like they could do it and be really good at it, relatively speaking. Meaning, but things like being able to develop a handstand or develop a skilled capacity, like being able to throw or sprint or jump or run, there's a much quicker tendency to say, well, I just couldn't do that. I wasn't athletic, or I didn't, I started too late. And it's like, I think, unfortunately, that both sells your potential short as an individual, but it also ends up leading directly to the causes of pain, injury, and stiffness that, wreck so many people's lives. Specifically, I can expand on that because this is something I'm writing about a lot in this book I'm working out. We look at our evolution and our history and we think, oh, born to run, we're persistence running. You might have heard the idea that we're persistence runners because we're built with, big Achilles. We could sweat. We could have, for thermoregulation, we have a nuchal ligament that holds our head steady while we move. And it's like all of those things are true of running, but they're absolutely also true of sprinting. And so my view is that as our earliest development happened with sprinting and throwing and jumping and climbing and rolling and carrying these very basic athletic skills, and then endurance running actually became an offensive tactic we developed later on.
Yeah.
Endurance running is something you earn. It doesn't matter how far you can go fast if you can't go fast enough to get far. It's something I've really been thinking about a lot recently. And unfortunately, even though we're primed for this kind of modern environment with our mental software, we forget the fact that our physical hardware is primed for survival. It's primed for these things to be able to pull yourself up, to push away, to carry something, to throw something, to sprint. And if you stop jumping and doing all these things with impact, you stop loading your bones, your fascia, your connective tissue, and your body, your functional threshold. So if you imagine yourself in a sphere, and the space you have in that sphere is your ability to move. And you can almost think of, someone who could jump up and touch the top of the sphere, jump to the side, or do a broad jump out, or roll backwards. It almost sets the limits of one simple movement, how you can move within that. And if your functional sphere is healthy, your joints are healthy, your tissue is healthy, you're mobile, you're connected. But the gravity is always trying to press in on that, and life is always trying to contract that. And the second you stop working to actively push that sphere out in any direction, it starts to get warped. And so just focusing on lifting weights for muscles or doing endurance running to build your cardio, or same with swimming or cycling, those are part of the equation. But there's this whole other side of athleticism that is necessary to keep your body functional. And so when people write this off with this idea of, oh, well, you know what, I just sprinting's dangerous, and I just do I'm just working on a 5K. It's like you're selling yourself short for what you could do, and you're also cutting off your ability to be healthy and successful in the long term. And then fundamentally, that's what we care about, right? Is like being healthy for life. And so that's what I think it's like. If you include athleticism as a major pillar with strength, with conditioning, cardio, and with flexibility, you fill out the table. Otherwise, you are warped.
Yeah, this is what brought me to ATG in the first place. So as an ex-athlete myself, I worked as a personal trainer right after school. That was my area of study, was applied health science. And I wanted to come over into the capital markets to understand how capital worked, because I wanted to ultimately make a bigger impact on the health and wellness industry by investing. But the problem is, over the past 12 years, everything started to hurt. So my knees hurt, my feet hurt, and I started searching. And so lo and behold, Ben Patrick comes across my radar for knees, and then you come across my radar for feet. And I love the message that you're preaching and really want to get into more and more of your content.
Yeah, well, that's good.
So before coming back to your methodology and kind of getting into the nitty gritty there, I want to hear about from high school through
Mhm.
college and then into your professional career. Who did you come in contact with that started developing the way you view training in a holistic way, whether it's professors or bosses or people you worked with?
Well, so I'll say the first huge influence was Eric Sobolewski, who's the guy I was mentioning earlier. Very fortunate because you went with a buddy when I was in high school. Just went to the gym, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I would just go do like half reps in the squat, 3 sets of 20, and then 3 sets of 20 split squats and RDLs. And I just want to be so sore that I couldn't sit down for a week. And that's what was my training. I
Jeez.
did that once a week, and it was not fun. And so then I went to college and started doing, all of a sudden you don't have an organized sport. I rode my freshman year, so I actually had like an organization around that. But then my sophomore year, I all of a sudden it's like I'm taking some exercise. Well, I think I started doing that. I bounced around with so many different things. Yeah, I didn't think you could be a trainer as a career. That seemed kind of silly at the time. But between statistics and math, there's a handful of different careers that I just kept bouncing around, and none of them seemed like they fit. I would do a lot of shadowing, and I went to some of the career resources there and took a strong interest inventory. And they were like, "Well, you should think about physical therapy." I was like, "Well, that sounds
Hmm.
professional enough." Because I would think about my profession in terms of, does it sound good to tell people? Does it seem stable? And does it make enough money? So like, is it,
Yeah.
those three were the matrices I decide on. So I kind of put me in the exercise sports science. And then one of my professors, because I worked at the gym as well, and this guy would come in and he would bench like heavy weight, like 315, and I would always work the 9 to midnight shift. And so
Hmm.
he'd come in there and we just hit it off, and so we start talking. And then it ended up being one snowy day, the gym was shut down, and I ended up messaging him about if he knew where there was a gym, and he goes, "Come meet me at this place at this time." And he took me down into the dungeon of the next door athletic facility, and we got to work out in it was the women's basketball strength and conditioning facility, but it was like the Olympic sports weightlifting room. It had such like Eleiko equipment. It was so nice. And so we just started every few days a week, and then Saturdays, 3 days a week, we'd lift, and he taught me everything I knew about lifting, and he introduced me to Olympic lifting and so many other things. And then on Saturdays, we'd go out to the field and set up some type of athletic thing. We jump over hurdles or run, and that was
Mhm.
my first introduction to so many things. And after that, I was like, this is what I want. I don't know what it is, but I want to do this. And so it
Mhm.
took a little while graduating school, because I didn't really know where I was going to end up or what I was going to do. So I ended up waiting tables for a while. And this is something that I don't think people appreciate, is that when you're getting started, you have to be willing to, no one's like, if you're starting as a personal trainer, you can make as much money as you want for how much you can sell. And you're not going to be able to
Yeah.
sell anything because you're not very good at sales or your skills. And
Yeah.
so while I applied for some different professional schools, I ended up not getting into any of them, but I
Mhm.
applied for the internship at the school. Didn't get that either. But the person who who turned me down from that said, "Hey, I've got a friend of mine in the area, and I think you would really love this gym." And so it was about 30 minutes away. He got me the foot in the door, and I met Kenny. Kenny Apili was one of my first professional mentor. He taught me so much about sales. He was the owner of the place called D1 Raleigh, which is like a strength conditioning gym there. That place,
Oh. Oh,
I
it
walked
was a
in.
D1 franchise?
Yeah. Yeah. But it was before they were franchised. They were used to be like owned partly by the orthopedic physical therapy institution and like a professional athletes. And so it was D1 Raleigh. If you've seen those gyms, you know how unique they are. At least this one was a 30 by 50 yard indoor turf field with no beams in the middle, and a full turf 20 by 30 yard weight room with a full physical therapy attached to it. It was
Oh
amazing. And
my.
so I walked in there and I was like, this is heaven. Massive speakers. It was just athletes everywhere. And so I talked to Ken, went in, shadowed, and then Kenny, luckily they had a part-time position. And I think that's one of the other things too, when people are coaching, seems to me to be a very passion-led industry, where you don't do coaching for the money or because it's, safe or stable. You do it because there's something that pulls you into teaching and coaching. And so because of that, those types of roles tend to be low barrier to entry, but high turnover rate. So what I found is that
Mhm.
most people, there's a reason it's like 1 in 10 for personal trainers don't make it after the first year. And then one
Mhm.
in five of those don't make it after the first 5 years. Those numbers might not be exactly accurate, but they're thematically and directionally correct. You
Yeah.
need to have something that also stabilizes some money. So I kept waiting tables for about a year and a half, or about 2 years after I got that job. And I was just working because there was an emotional growth too. Because Kenny, when I was younger, I had this idea like, oh, they'll just put me on salary and then I'll have some, and it was like 20 grand. So it was like, not, it was like, I'm not going to live off of that long term, but it was just this idea of like, oh, salary and then benefits. And it's just because there are other coaches there that are on salary. And I just thought that that was going to be the thing. And it took me a long time to really wake up to the idea that like, no, you have to actually sell. You have to develop a skill. You have to market yourself. And so that I was able to combine with an interest because most of what I was doing was trying to fix my own body and my own pains. And I started taking the classes there because I didn't really know much about athleticism at that point still. So I would take the
Mm.
classes with Kenny while he coached the college and high school kids, and I would learn all the stuff. And I just kept, trying to figure it out myself. And that slowly graduated. Kenny taught me more about business, so he taught me both literally by taking his classes about athleticism and while watching him coach and learning sales from him. So he really helped in that regard. And so those two for years. And then, I was always thinking about continually learning with podcast. It was a 30-minute drive from where I live to where I work. So that hour a day was podcast every day,
Yeah.
nonstop, all the
Yeah.
time of business and exercise. So
Who are
it
your
was
favorites back then?
Barbell Business. So Barbell Shrugged Business.
I remember Barbell Shrugged.
Yeah, they had a business side, which I really loved. They did that. Dave Tate with Elite FTS was really good. Barbell Shrugged also was good. The Strength Coach podcast with Mike Boyle and the host, I can't remember, like that. They always had a business segment there. Those were really big for me early on. And I think that might have been the main one. There was a lot more like YouTube. And this is a lot of the OG guys. Mark Bell was still doing his stuff, and, Elite FTS. And there's just a handful of these guys that would do like the T Nation powerlifting, bodybuilding stuff. And so you're just learning these, like trying to write your own programs and then exploring and seeing what happens. And there's DeFranco. There's all these names that like 10, 15, 20 years ago where they were the guy. And then they were early onto the scene with the stuff. And so I was just learning. People ask us, like, where do you start? It's like, well, I would learn, but then I would see how that worked with the people. I had taken so many physiology and anatomy classes in college that I had this weird kind of smatter because I had planned to go to physical therapy school and nursing school. And so that those were, I was like, all right, but I need to take all the prereqs there. So I had a lot of formal backing of like what the body was. So I was able to pair these concepts of in the ground trenches through these technicians with like the actual physiology, and then learning about the pain and the physical therapy side and seeing what that worked from the physical therapists that were there, in addition to other aspects. So it created this kind of like, you learn some things in college, but most of it's just familiarity with terms and some concepts. But really the stuff you learn on the job is the stuff you are interested in. And so that first few years was really focused on that and just trying to figure out how it worked in my own body.
So all this was in Raleigh.
Yes, all of Raleigh, from 2015 to 2020, because then I moved to the COVID happened right before COVID. Unfortunately, I also got an introduction to how businesses and most gyms work, which is not ideal because what you get is two settings. One, you get someone who's great at being a personal trainer or coach, and it gets enough clientele so they can hire somebody else, and then they open up their own space, and then eventually they realize that they're bad businessmen. They're bad at business and they don't know how to separate themselves, and they know how to run a thing and they can't separate themselves and learn the skill of business, and that causes problems. Or you get someone that's a silent partner with a lot of money and they come in and fund a gym and open it up, but then they don't understand that when you have a personal trainer that's really good, you're not going to make as much money from them because they're a highly skilled technician. So it's a lower investment, but it's a long term. If you can create a gym and you can get highly skilled people that work with you and want to stay with you, you have people for life, because once people have that relationship with you as clients, they'll stay for years, decades. Like I still am friends and have clients that pay me and work with me that I've known for years. As I moved, that's the relationship you have. But the problem is, in a business is going to think about things as numbers and say, well, we're paying too much. And so just the way the early D1 was set up, there was a rub between Kenny, who was a part owner, and the professional athletes who were other owners, and the physical therapy, who is a big corporation and a primary owner. And that ended up sinking that business. But fortunately, Kenny was gracious and helped me get a spot at another gym local nearby, and I was able to build that out. So I was able to have an experience there as like a director of performance and really working on building out a website. And that's really where I started to think more about the business side, because I had to, schedule the coaches underneath me, organize the classes, recreate a thing, work on the marketing, drive around, talk to people, create, relationships and stuff like that. And then I was listening to business pod, Bedros Keuilian and Craig Jones, not Craig Jones, I got BJJ on my mind. Before his current Bedros podcast, it was, I forgot what it was, but I listened to every single episode of that, and there were all these business podcasts I started listening to that were really valuable from
He's F45, right?
He is Fit Body Boot Camp. Yeah,
Fit Body Boot Camp. Okay, that's right.
Yeah. So but you listening to that and listening to their story, and it was like, okay, that's really I remember I was just driving around. This is in Raleigh Cary area, but I had put a list of 100 physical therapy and chiropractic, and because I was going to drive around and see, like, hey, would you want to come and like we'll pass your clients on when they finish? We'll get them back to sport, whatever it is. And I made a list, drove around every single one of them, emailed them, followed up, called, emailed, and just doing that. And while I'm driving around and listening to these podcasts, and eventually I'm like, the social media stuff, like we were started making some of the social media things, and I really enjoyed that. It was fun. I enjoyed coming up with camps and programs and ideas and making the flyers and like it was just I'm like I could do all of this. This is I could do this. And I just maybe it's a false sense of confidence, but when COVID happened, unfortunately, North Carolina decided that gyms were not essential, and so they shut down all gyms. And so in the middle of that, I was like, I'll open up my own place. And so very fortunate to have one of my Patrick Hardy. He's so I'm gonna go see him when I go back to North Carolina in a few weeks. And this is another thing I always think is valuable for people that are like thinking about starting off. If you're starting off like and want to open up your own gym, people think about this. The worst thing you can do is get tied into a really expensive lease, because what you think about the first time, like people do not understand how expensive a lease is over years and years, especially if you're starting off. It's like if you're successful, the place you'd rather be outgrowing a place constantly than have gotten a big place and be crushed by the extent of a massive lease over the span of 3-5 years, because that $5,000-$10,000 you have to pay every month, it eats your soul away over the span of of several years. But oftentimes it's like if you're willing to be scrappy, you can scale as you go. And I think a lot of times you get a coach or trainer that, depending on the perspective, they want to open up a place, when they look a certain way and do this. It's like when you're just getting started, it's okay if it's not the best place. And a lot of times you're going to have an opportunity. And in my case, one of my clients, he said, hey, I'm this big lease in this space, and there's this side corner that used to be a garage, and the landlord's son moved out. Would you want to come and try a spot here? And it was in the middle of COVID. I was like, yep, let's give it a shot. And so I went in there, and a lot of sweat, we like tore down the walls and I got some used turf, rolled it out there, painted the walls, got the racks, and slowly but surely built it out. And, I didn't go into debt to do it. I used most of my life savings, but it was like a little bit of that, but I used that, but I brought people in with me. And you just like, for people that like thinking about starting, and so most gyms get started by an individual. And I think they see the successful, the Mike Boyles, Cressys, Eric Cressys, and these people that have these massive gyms and stuff. And I think, oh, that's what I need to start with. Those guys didn't start off like that. They started, with a handful of clients, and they would come and see them, and they wanted to train, maybe going outside and doing stuff. And, so in 2020, I was able to open up my own little spot. It was about 25 feet across by 75 feet long. So, like 1,200 square feet, and I had 2 racks, but I would just use the space that was outside, and slowly but surely, but I can't. The thing that made a difference there is because in 2019, right before COVID, I'd kind of started to do some math. It was like, I need to start figuring out a way that it doesn't just depend on my dollars and time to be able to do this. So I started doing some online stuff, which if there's anything that I'm going off, just, interrupt me, but I'll just
No. This is all extremely valuable.
So before I started my own gym, I realized sort of the things of like, I could start to see some of the numbers, and I already got a little bit of false confidence about, 2018, about, all right, I could start doing some of this myself. It's not that crazy. And so I would get up in the morning and start writing a book. And actually, this is another thing that I think a lot of people are really uncertain about doing something on their own. So they find someone to go partner with, because especially when you're young, the last thing you want to do is, I'm starting a business. Like, no, we're starting, me and my buddy are starting. It's always, we want to do it because it's, it's scary to say you're going to do something by yourself. And I remember part of this, while I was driving around talking to people, I met this one guy who was a chiropractic, and I could tell he had opened up his own spot. I could tell he had a little bit of entrepreneurial thing. I was really into it. And so a lot of times we read into other people what we're feeling ourselves. And so I definitely picked up from him. He's like, yeah, he had a little bit of this fear. I'm like, well, we could do he would like golf. And he was like, we could do like a golf performance thing and do like, work on these motions and movements and write it. I never really played golf. I didn't even like golf, I still am horrible at golf, but I was like, all right, this is an idea. I can get behind this. And so we met and got pizza, and I was like, okay, we'll start writing this. We'll do this golf performance manual. You can write the golf side and talk about specifics of that. And I'll talk about the health and nutrition and movement side. And I just got up and I started doing it every morning. I would get up and start at 6 a.m. and started writing. And ironically, that first effort has literally, I could draw a line from where I am now to where, in terms of the same project I'm working on, which is, it's like you're working on these things and it becomes the business offering you have over time. But I would get up and I'd write, and every week I'd send him, hey, I got this far done. Hey, I got this done. And he never got back to me. And pretty quick, I realized that he was not, I was the one.
You're just on your own.
But I just kept going. And so, but as part of that, I just started an Instagram in 2019. And I never really, I don't like social media. I don't really use it. And so I started that, started TikTok. But once you learn the game, it's like if I give you a soccer ball, you might be like, I don't know what to do with this. But eventually, if you make up a game, you learn how to balance the ball, juggle it, whatever it is, you can start to learn the game. And once you learn the game, or whatever the discipline is, or the medium is, you can have fun with it. And that's what I figured out. Oh, here's the game of social media and Instagram, and I could create things. And so I started just to expand what I could offer. And so I took that little first thing, that golf performance manual, and I turned that into when I had a guy walked in and he wanted to work with some baseball things, and I was like, I could put together a manual on help. I realized that by using information, I could leverage my skill set and knowledge to extend beyond my time. And so if someone hired me as a coach or trainer, well, now you have a packet, a welcome packet, starting a nutrition packet, videos to work on, exercises that go beyond the session. And so those things is why I tell everybody, even if you don't have intentions of doing something online, by starting that, by working on recording videos, you get better at your enunciation, your speaking, your communication. You realize that, oh, I can't just say, do this, go here, and I show you. I have to actually articulate. By writing, you
Yeah.
get better at thinking. All of these things extend your capacity as a professional, so to speak. And exactly. And it's thinking about, how do I start to maximize my time? So if I have to, if I have someone who comes in and does a session, and, am I supposed to be a physical therapist, a personal trainer, a best friend, a nutritionist, a psychiatrist, all these things, which is what you are as a trainer, a coach. You're really doing all these things, and you're being a liaison between, a medical professional, what they don't understand about this stuff, and trying to speak. You're not assuming the role of these things, but you're playing the liaison between the client and what all problems they're having. And that's a personal trainer. I mean, that's really what you're doing. And so if I could explain these things with like, here's read this, watch this quick 10-minute video. It goes over my 5 diet principles. And like, okay. And now I don't have to have that
Scale.
conversation. I can ask you, what'd you think of that? And so I started to see the value of that. And so even I had this, like, I would extend, I switched my members into like the people I had that were working. I was like, hey, would you like to pay a little bit more and have this service? And I can write programs for you online. Just enough to get like some money coming in that was consistent and recurring, that wasn't tied to the sessions I had. And so by working and just kind of hitting the people that, it's not like you're good at the stuff when you start, but this is the thing people undervalue about personal training, is that the relationship you develop with these people is very personal, and they want to see you succeed, and the energy you put in makes up for your lack of skill and ability. Like, I'm far more skilled than I have ever been as a coach or trainer now, but it doesn't, like, people will pay you more for the energy and the love that you show up front than, there's there's a valley, and we can talk about that. There's a valley between what people pay on either extreme. The best in the world, who gets to be a little bit of an asshole and a jerk, like, just they're so skilled and unmatched, or really unskilled, but just they're so that you could just tell that they care about you. And so those two extremes make a lot of money, but the middle is where most people really get burnt out. But ultimately, the 2019, I started to just have some money. And so when 2020 happened, I had a favorable release, that was what I was getting at. The lease thing is the beginning, is like, all you need is one opportunity and one little breakthrough in one spot, and you get something that's favorable, that works for you. And then you put a lot of sweat effort to make it good. Like I would, you show up, paint, and treat it like you own the place. And then you use that to keep climbing momentum, and you try to create that. And so then you could we could talk about business models and stuff that are successful in that, but I've thrown a lot at you there. So
Yeah.
I'll let you
Jeez,
respond.
Graham, you can go, man. And I just want to let the stallion run. Oh man. So between you opening up your own clinic, your own facility where you had your own clients, and D1, when did your philosophy around barefoot training really start to take shape?
Okay, so I just wrote this blog about editing. Editing is, and this is a Matthew McConaughey, I heard his quote the other day, is life going forward is a mystery, in reverse, looking back, it's a science. And so in some sense, I didn't come up with that, but like, what happened afterwards, so we can look at observations and draw data points and create. And history is something that's written retroactively. Like, we don't know what all is happening right now, but it takes us. We oftentimes only get to revise and look at things. So everything we do in the first try it's just a sloppy first draft. You're just throwing everything down there. And so the thing is that every single person that's done something that's noteworthy stumbled through it as a personally led thing. They wanted to do it. Like, Ben Patrick, I just want to play basketball and I need to be able to jump as a part of that. So I'm going to fix my knees. And it's like, in retrospect, I wanted to make something that was great to help people my age. And I wanted to, like, no. That all stuff is stuff you come up with afterwards. It's a narrative you layer on top of this to organize it. And that's what, say you can't change the past. Absolutely you can. That's the point of therapy, if there is one, in terms of like a meaningful thing, is to comb through the messiness of your hair and see where, I see these, because we selectively remember facts. And so the effort you have, the people that are the most successful on social media, they're just the ones that spend the most time editing the story of their life and revising it into a thing that has gems and takeaways and bullet points and philosophies for the listener, for the viewer. And so that's the value. Is it's not like at one point I was like, barefoot. What it was is my first injury was a sprained ankle. I was rowing my freshman year. I was running down the field. And I stepped and boom, left ankle ankle's gone. And I
Yeah.
went to physical therapy. I mean, that was pretty depressing as the first real injury of my life. And I hobbled around in crutches for a week or a few weeks and went to physical therapy. And they didn't even take my shoes off. And it was basically just doing some calf raises and did some
Hmm.
ankle, put a little loop around your ankle and do some of the, left and right. And that was it. I didn't know any different at the time. But I remember a few weeks after that, it's like 2 or 3 months later, and my buddy and I were throwing a football, and I was like, all right, maybe I could do a little cutting. And I just remember feeling very hesitant. I was like, maybe I could, like, all right, I guess if I stop and turn left, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm good. And that was my physical therapy. That was my return to sport, was me thinking like, I'm just gonna jog around. And the
Yeah.
problem is that I slowly, my next year, sophomore year, I dislocated my shoulder for the first time. My junior year, I threw out my back, had a bad disc injury, and so I sort of had these things that were popping up. And I got to the point where I was at D1, and I remember my patellar tendonitis was so bad because I did this period of time where I didn't really know how to squat well, but I was doing the squat
Mm.
every day, the Bulgarian method at the time. Again, I wouldn't blame that per se as much as my inability to use the right set of muscles. Regardless,
Yeah.
I didn't know what I knew about now. I didn't know what I know now about fascia and all that stuff. But I had patellar tendonitis, I had strained my calf, I had turf toe and plantar fasciitis on turf toe on one side, plantar fasciitis on the other, shin splints because I tried to get back into running. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was just these years of like, I was like 24. I'm like, I feel like I'm 40. Just doesn't feel right. And the worst is I'm trying to coach kids, teach them how to be athletic and teach people,
Yeah.
personal training clients, how to be healthy. And I'm like, I'm having them demonstrate stuff because my knees hurt. And I'm like, this seems wrong. And I'm like, way too young for this. And so what it ended up being is like, I saw a video of myself walking. That was the thing. And I was like, that guy looked so awkward. I had not yet acknowledged that my hair was going and I had this Jedediah beard because whatever, tried to grow a beard, but it was only like chin down. So there was nothing on my cheeks. You get these unfortunate reflections where you see yourself objectively and you go, there's something I need to start refining here. And so that's where these kind of two mindsets, just where the blog piece I mentioned, it's like there's the creative mind and then there's the editing mind. And the creative mind is just taking things and putting them together. We're just going to throw it down there. But the editing is the one that judges. It steps back and looks objectively and perceives and says, what's good here? And it refines. It's like Michelangelo chipping away at the marble to make David. David was there. It's just Michelangelo had to bring him out, so to speak. And so there's this back and forth dance between you go through creative periods where you try things and you explore and then you refine. And, the better, there could be macro, large periods of creativity and refinement, and there's smaller dances in between. Like you write something and refine it. Do a podcast, you edit it. You write down questions and you write down an introduction and you refine it. And so the work of your life is in editing it. And so in that capacity, I started to go through a big period of really examining this. And so that began with my foot because I was looked down at my feet one day and I saw that video of me walking and I'm duck footed and I'm asymmetrical. And I looked down at my feet. I'm like, why does one foot turn out? And and it's these kind of simple things. I was at this Christmas party last night and one of the ladies there was asking why her knee hurts when she squatted. And she squats down and lo and behold, one foot just turns like 45 degrees out and the other one stays straight. I'm like, do you see that? And it's like, you take these things for granted, but there's this level of like she just had never paid attention to that. And I was like, can you fix that in your knee? And I'm like, do you see why your knee hurts? And it was very simple. And it's one of those things where the obvious thing that either someone points out to you, and generally people will point it out to you if you actually ask, but you have to have trusted friends and be open to that feedback. You start to notice something and that it becomes an inroad. It's not like I fixed my foot. It's like, all right, well, how do I do that different? And so then when my foot changes, now my back shifts. Oh, now I feel that. And then I start to notice the connection between my shoulders, which are repeatedly dislocated and all these different things. I'm like, I'm not going to blame it on the physical therapy, but because I had a lack of awareness, I didn't take ownership at that point either. But, I had this injury and never really rehabbed it and then had echoes throughout the rest of my body for years. And so the process of going and building from that, I just started to take my shoes off more and I changed my shoes to these like knockoff Merrells, they would fall apart in 3 months because they're cheap Amazon things and I would put duct tape on the bottom. But I have my clients, I'm like, hey, everybody I worked with knew, take your shoes off, take your shoes off. Everybody come in, take your shoes off. And they got used to that. And so even at D1, I just like everybody was just like, hey, take your shoes off. And that was it. And so then, it's funny because then a few years later, within a year or so, like I'd shaved and you got more of like a similar appearance of it. And you start to see people's physical capacity change when people get in shape. Like, for example, somebody that like they're overweight, they're out of shape. It's like their eyes are dark, their hair is unkempt. It's like there's something about it. And it's like they start to really take care of themselves. It's like they start to see themselves and refine all aspects of their body, their mind, their speech, their lifestyle. lifestyle. And that really was that period I was going through, and it built. And so I just started to notice that, like, yeah, my feet are not good, but everybody else is too. And so that really led me down this path of like exploring those. And that turned into wearing different shoes, exploring different barefoot training. Like, but it took a while. I mean, it took years and years to like slowly add on different things and acknowledge them. But, you know, like, I'm still finding things now. But ultimately, what I realized is that the lowest common denominator for people to start working on their feet is the thing that they've ignored the most, which is almost across the board for everybody. Their feet are in shoes or in socks. They don't think about them. They don't notice it. And so if I can
Yeah.
start with that, then we can unravel the change for every other part of your body and build up from the ground up,
Mm.
so to speak.
Do you have a Charles Poliquin? And what I mean by that is a lot of what ATG is like repackaged Poliquin. Do you have an analogous inspiration?
You know, I think some of those things are. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I also know that there's a. I read the 48 Laws of Power, which if you ever
Mm.
remember, that was a good one. But he talks about the
Yeah.
idea of like if you make a claim to authority or an appeal to antiquity. So like, you know, these are ancient wisdoms from Ryan Holiday, right? He
Yes.
says a lot of very profound things, but it's all written in the idea of, oh, well, this is just with the Stoics' ancient wisdom, and so therefore he gets to speak with
Really?
that credibility. You look at Jordan Peterson, who speaks to Carl Jung and all these ancient Nietzsche. And
Yes.
so like he's standing on the shoulders of giants, and so whenever you can't identify the shoulders whose giants you're standing on, there's a level of like, I'm just bringing this forward in some capacity. So in some sense, though, now if you take that shoulders of giants, there's sometimes you'll say like, you know, Ben Patrick standing on the shoulders of Charles Poliquin, and you just take that forward and you bring it into another application. And then there's like a Peterson who stands between Nietzsche and Jung, which is another like, on two different shoulders. And it's like, but you start to pull these different pieces together. Like Thomas Meyer's Anatomy Trains is something I'm literally reading through right now just as part of it. But
Mm.
it's not to say that I don't feel like anything I've ever come up with is unique, because I'll meet Chris Duffin. I went and met him up in, he's former world record powerlifter. He's Kabuki strength. I mean, like, the guy's
Mm.
unreal. He's super strong, super smart, intelligent. And I met him and I realized that like the stuff he's talking about, the stuff I was saying about the foot hand glove and the feet, he was saying 15, 20 years ago. Kelly Starrett, you know, talking about movement and these things. And it's like, there's so many people that like, I've collected a bunch of little pieces and pulled together a bunch of different parts from so many people that nothing I've ever said feels genuine. But I don't necessarily have a perfectly isolated, this is, I mean, the writing stuff you learn from Arthur Lydiard. Now I got Charles in the brain. Arthur Lydiard, he's the guy who talked about the periodization and the pyramid you building up and your capacity, speed training. So much of that stuff. So unfortunately, in terms of the claim to authority, what I don't have is this pretty story about, you know, this is the antiquity, but I like to really focus on things that are very obvious to you. So I don't know if that makes sense. Obviously, you asked a question I haven't thought about well, so I'm verbally processing. But does that make sense in a sense, like the way I'm trying to get at it? What do you hear me saying? Let's just go over that.
So the thing that's appealed to me about your content is that it makes intuitive sense. So the analogy of the base of a impressive structure has to be grounded in a solid foundation. That fundamentally makes sense. Whether you're talking a skyscraper, whether you're talking a pyramid, whether you're talking anything that is impressive, it makes sense that if your base is malformed and suboptimal, you will not be able to express your full potential. And I've experienced that firsthand. So that's something that's common sense once you hear it. But before you hear it, you just consider yourself unathletic or past your prime, or like, oh, I used to sprint, but those days are behind me. So the thing that brought me to your content was, like so many people, I jumped on the Barefoot, the minimalist shoe bandwagon
Mm.
in maybe 2 years ago, and loved them. And then one day I was at the gym doing sprints on an assault trainer, and I felt something just pop in my right foot.
Mm.
And I was like, oh shit, what was that? And I just started limping. And I was like, is that it? Am I done? Now, leading up to that, Graham, as we discussed before coming on the air, my initial sport from 4th grade through 10th grade was ice hockey. Now, if you know ice hockey, your foot is locked in a boot. I have my
Yeah.
skates. Got my skates right here. Right?
Oh
I mean,
man.
there's no motion in these things, man.
No.
Zero. And I remember deciding I wanted to do track and field in 10th grade because I wanted the physique of a sprinter. And I come from a family of sprinters. So I was like, I want to do track. And I had the worst shin splints. So I remember going to an orthopedist, and the orthopedist was like, oh, you need orthotics. I mean, this is all stuff you've talked about. Graham, I'm not joking when I say I've been wearing orthotics from 14 to 34
Wow.
when I finally got on barefoot shoes. Like, I hadn't done anything athletic without orthotics. And then suddenly I go into barefoot shoes, I sprint, and something snaps. And then I discover your content. It's like, oh, all the fascia in my feet were completely dormant. Like, they've been dormant for 20 years. No wonder something happened.
So, okay, I think what you just pointed out is rather than making a claim to some type of like philosophical aspect, meaning there's not feel like there's not a school or a thinker, so to speak, other than it's intuitive. It should make sense. Like there's these things I look at, like the argument I made about our ancestors and how they moved and jump. It's like that should be obvious into something. And if I can't create a compelling story about why this immediately, yeah, oh yeah, my feet, can I move those? And so much of those things are really just there are incredible thinkers whose ideas I have jogged and expanded my brain and helped me think about things, but it's not in some capacity. What I want is to help people reconnect with the truth that they can obviously know. And I think that that if you see that deeply, you don't have to be the best in the world to be able to sprint. And I think that's what it is. Like you don't have to be able to jump. There's a basic level of things that you could do, that you would do, that you know are would be better for you. And those ideas of like pulling different categories together of your body is a thing to experience, a thing that will take you along a path. And if you are lazy in some capacity or you are unaware in another side of the spectrum, if either one of those pulls you outside of this center of truth and groundedness, then you will end up not living up to your potential. And you don't have to be the best in the world to live up to your potential. And that's, you know, so much of what I really try to. That's why I spend so much time on pain, because pain, stiffness, inability, those are the areas that you have not paid attention to. And there is a specific, and maybe this is a better way to say it. Like you look at triphasic training or French contrast, you know, post activation potentiation and eccentric training and all these like speed work and all these like really complex things. And even like the short and long range stuff where you look at Charles Poliquin, if you look at those training methodologies, in the extent that they are helping you create world-class performance, yeah, those are people who have like, they're putting, you know, they're like scientists that are like putting together different tinctures to make something unique. And on the other side, there's this like training methodologies that create acronyms, that create quasi-religions for people that are like, this is how I live, this is what I do. Those become this kind of a limited brain thinking the other way around, which creates this dogmatic like infighting about what's right. You know, are you vegan? Are you carnivore? It's like there's just religions for people, and it's not helpful. So in the middle, it's like I'm not making claims about your this specific method will make you a world class athlete, because it's not going to. You'd have to really go into these things, but it will make you avoid. It'll keep you from stop. It'll help you no longer avoid the thing that's causing you pain. And like that's the thing is when the work I do with people gets them from the stiff, unrefined, unexamined, you know, out of shape and in pain to athletic. That athletic is just blank canvas. Like that's the thing that I don't like. It's not like I'm trying to get
Yeah,
you to be a
yeah,
world
yeah.
class athlete. I just want you to be a blank canvas again, where you've actually started to form a sense of self. And so I don't know what ideas or what Poliquin that is, because it's not like I'm really trying to make somebody specific. I don't care what it is you do, but it is you would come to me with my feet hurt, my shins hurt, my back hurts, I'm overweight, whatever these things are. And instead of trying to apply a fancy methodology or something that constricts your thinking, let's just get you to reflect back and comb through the annals of your history so that you can look and say, oh, I can start to understand, because pain is a message. It's an invitation to understand yourself. And so that's what, in some sense, I think I had trouble answering the question, is because it's not about like creating an outcome. It's just about using the opportunity that's in front of you so that you can have opportunity and longevity and health span in life. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does. The way I interpret that is you're returning people to basically to a childlike state. So one of the things that stood out to me, when you were talking to Nsima and to Mark, was the importance of play,
Mhm.
right? And as kids aren't thinking about increasing their vertical or how fast can I run or what's my workout. It's like they're just playing. They're playing tag, they're running, they're jumping, they do it naturally. And at some point, we just like stop doing all of those things.
Mhm.
And it's not really about like, if you want to be competitive, then that's great. There's nothing wrong with being competitive and trying to win at something. But continuing to play through your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s just brings so much more meaning to life. It's not just about your performance, it's about enjoying your body and enjoying all the data that's coming in through your eyes, your ears, your tongue, your fingers, and your ability to just move and enjoy music, to dance, to do things, just to play. Like that's
Mhm.
something that's just lost at some point.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's two parts of this, which is there is a natural competitiveness. Like you see kids that definitely want like, oh, I wonder how if I could do that again. And like there's part of that like focus that we like the spiraling down. And I think that there's two things that happen. One of which is we attach an identity to an outcome. So that's the quote unquote semi professionalization of youth sports, where you're not just playing soccer and you're not just competing to see what you could do, because there's infinite games and there's finite games. And once we start to attach I'm the best and this is what I'm going to do, and that doesn't even have to happen in the context of professional or like, youth organized sports. I could just, because you're not meeting, if you are, we're going to go two different routes. The kids who attach an identity to a thing, and then there's going to be the society that creates expectations and norms and has a bucket theory of learning. So we'll come back to that in a second. But if you were a kid, kids are playful, they're naturally collaborative, they want to work together, they'll play these infinite games. Just the point of playing street hockey with your friends is to keep playing street hockey with your friends. It's like, yeah, I might win, but if I win so badly and I hurt you in the process and cheat, you never want to play with me again. And so
That's
even
right.
like that's an animal, that's a could preserved aspect of play that goes back, I think, all the way to lobsters or something. And so like, it's, to quote my Jordan Peterson there,
Lobster.
like that aspect is like, but think about the kid who can't do that. It's the kid that, their home life is not good. They're not getting the love. And so they need to put others down. They play the zero sum game to win. And so the play thing is still on board, but you have to let go of the underlying incentives that otherwise your identity is not attached to this thing and there's no right answer. Like, I think it's identity and comparison, if I really summarize all of that up. So the comparison is, if you do this, you have to be the best at it. And I'm going to pour the important things in. And so the comparison is like you're getting tested, all this stuff. The identity is taking away your removal of love. If you don't do this, you won't be loved. You'll be a failure. And if you do this, you're not going to be as good as someone else. And so that's why people don't try something. They don't go to, pick up a new sport or go try to learn how to dunk, because they're going to feel stupid. And you know what they don't like? Is to feel stupid. People will go way out of their way to avoid feeling stupid. But stupid compared to who?
Isn't that the
That's
truth,
the
man?
thing. It's the comparison.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Dang. Let's talk about business models. What are the components of your business today? Whether it's in-person training, online, you've got the social media, like how do you make money?
Okay, so this is gonna be remember the thing I said earlier where there was like the where you're a young trainer and people love and pay for your energy. You get a lot of money there. And then you're known and well known and renowned for highly skilled, and it's demonstrable how skilled you are. A lot of money there. There's a big that you start to realize, I don't know half the stuff I think I know. And half is like, I don't know 90% of the stuff I think I know. That is where you start to really go into this reflection, because what you see is people, they're great at the Peloton instructor, or they're great at this like rah, I'm going to motivate you to do this stuff. And they play a role for people. That definitely works, but it weighs on your soul. If you're a creative person who wants to learn, you have to, the editing process of reflecting on like, man, I need to go back. And so it's a continual education, but continual education means you're changing, and people want you to stay the same person, because when you're high energy and you do this, eventually you get tired, and you don't always have the youth to like make up for what you lack in education by bending over backwards.
Right.
You go like, I'm gonna get on the ground.
You're
And do
Asian,
this.
yeah.
And that's a hard thing, is that's why people get burnt out, is because they start off and there is a real pressure of time and resources, and you have kids and expectations and monetary bills and stuff. So there's that, but it's also like, it's very humbling. I mean, I cannot tell you, the last 5 years, there's been times where like, you start off and everything's great. The last 10 years, like as a coach, there's times are really great. You're getting started off. And I remember like when I first started to really get in, like there's about a year and a half where I was just doing like the classes and waiting tables, and I was kind of resentful. I was like, it's not working. And then Kenny was like, it just clicked for me. And I was like, oh, I have to sell. And then there was about a year and a half where I just really leaned in and got the business, started selling and closing. And I was just 60 sessions a week. I was like, he called me PT King, because I was just like selling sessions, and I work and fill up my book, and I would 6 days a week.
All
It
at
was
D1.
just great. All at D1. Yeah. And then I started to get like, okay, I can do the numbers here. And unfortunately, that's when things started to shift. I went to the other gym and I started, okay, let me try this new skill, which is not going to be working as a personal trainer, but I'm going to see if I can take a percentage of what the whole department brings in, because I want to start to see if I can change this new skill. So there's learning a new skill that way, which means you're making less money. So I was still making some money from in-person training, but more of it was coming from like running a business, so to speak. And then when you go down to, having your own business, it was just the best. My third business model was, I had memberships or my own private gym. This model, so we'll get to a peak, because there's a peak, and then there's a W here, right here. So the first peak on the far left is really getting in, crushing it in one thing. You a lot of energy, a lot of focus, in-person training. You got a model, word of mouth, and you're doing this stuff, and you're doing it over time. But eventually, you start to learn more. You change your models. You start to realize that, like, okay, I'm running out of time and energy. There's a logistical nightmare that starts to happen. And so you start to try other things. And then I went through my own gym. This is like the third business model, which was the best. If there's one thing that works really well for coaches, it's your own space. And I had a $2,000 a month rent, and I rented the first half of the day out to another coach for $1,000. So I had $1,000 a month rent, which is amazing. And I had my own space. And I charged everybody a monthly membership. They could come 1, 2, or 3 times a week, and 1, 2, or unlimited times a week. I put the workouts on 5 boards for the whole week, and I was just there. I didn't do like, I would kind of work with them and answer questions, but like I was already starting to do some of the online stuff then. So I'd film, but I'd go in the afternoon. I'd say, I'm here from 2 to 8, Monday through Friday. You pick the days you want to come in. Here's the workouts.
Mm.
And it was it. It was because what that did is it bought me time in the morning. So in the morning, I'd wake up and I would read, I would write, I'd work on my other business, but I lumped everything together. I didn't care if you would pay me twice as much to go in the morning. I'm not going in the morning. So what you start to notice is I'm making more money, but now I was making more money earlier. I'm making less money, but I bought my time back. And so rather than
Yeah.
working 60, 70 hours a week, I'm now working 30 hours, 25 hours a week, and I'm working out. I'm talking to people at social hour, I'm filming stuff. I'm doing it all at once because I now
Wow.
have enough of a reputation with people that I can do this. But it's less money, but I'm buying my time back. And
Yeah.
so that creates this kind of upswing in the next W, which is the things I was using my morning times were writing the ebooks, building online programs, starting to sell those and create the social media. That starts to catch on. So then 2021 starts to really pick up some momentum and seeing 2022. And that's when I have a combination. I have my online, my in-person stuff. People are coming to see me. And so I have that revenue from that, which is like 10 to 12, 10 to 15,000 any given month. And then I started to have some sales online. And the thing with online is you're either the flavor of the month or you're not. And it's like you get
Mhm.
when people are joining in. I was doing this great foot challenge, ready to run was what it was called at the time. And I was selling people into that, which was like a $97 thing for 28 days. So it was like a little group you joined and there was a program. I wrote a whole book. And so I just got obsessed with that. And that's when I really figured out the game of social media. Like, oh, this is how you make reels. And so I really started to have fun with that. And now this is where you start to see this moving roller coaster is because I found things that I really enjoyed. And this is the thing is most trainers, there's an intelligence and an empathetic capacity for people that are trainers to connect with other people. But as part of that, they start to learn the creative. They want to move. The people that are the best ones, they continue to evolve. And that evolving means they need something else that's really creative that gets their soul engaged, whether that's writing, whether that's making content, whether that's teaching and educating. And so you see the people that last the test of time, the Kelly Starretts, the Cressies, these guys that, have been doing, Jill Miller, that have been doing it for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They're
Yeah.
educators. The Ben Greenfields, they write books, they have a podcast. They're not just doing in-person stuff. And so you start to see this shift and you change and you move along. So I figured out the game of social media and that was a lot of fun. And then I had this opportunity with Mark reached out to the podcast. I came out to the podcast and then he asked me to come back and train with him for a few weeks. And I said, okay.
Of
So I was
course.
as willing. I put the gym. I had another coach come in and babysit it for me for a few weeks but I came out here and I was like, this is where I need to be. I met a girl I like that here, my wife. So that worked
Your
out
wife.
too. But what I realized so then I was like, there's an opportunity here to come and learn and really like, be around the people that are coming in and out of the podcast and just be around some amazing coaches and travel and sold the gym and parted ways with the clients and just basically sold everything. I
Oh, you
packed up
sold the
my
gym.
car. It wasn't, I was able to sell the equipment to Patrick and he has another guy that came in and like this physical therapy golf thing. So it worked. It just moved. Basically
Oh,
though,
wow.
when you sell a gym, you have the value of equipment and the value of contracts. And I just did month to month.
Mhm.
I wasn't really worried about that. And besides, no one's going to continue paying top dollar for a personal trainer that doesn't exist at the gym anymore. So I didn't have I didn't have a contractual setup gym. It was just they're paying me for sessions every month. And so it wasn't any residual value there. So it was just the value of the equipment. And actually the lease was still there. So I just sold the equipment to somebody else and then was able to move. And I was just but at that point though, I just had the online stuff and I realized that there's a lot more stuff I need to learn to really be the best version of what I'm offering to people. Cause I had
Mm.
over the span of 2021 into 2022, over that 6-7 month, I had about a few thousand people that signed up about my programs and I would get feedback from them and say, what's working, what's not working. And I took that seriously and I was like, okay, all right, this seems like it's missing some stuff on Achilles. I made 6 versions of the foot training, 5 versions of the shoulder training and 3 versions of the hip training. And on
Mm.
top of that, I rewrote the book for each. I had a 40 to 50,000 ebook for each that I rewrote from scratch 3 or 4 times for each book. And this is after I'd already built a version of each of these programs and made 3 versions of that beforehand. So this is just like constant. I'm the same program, working on it, refining, making it better. In the background, I'm learning how to make a landing page, how to make an opt-in page, how to write emails, how to write sales copy, how to, make YouTube videos, how to edit things. And so you're learning all these skills that support the presentation on the front end. But then there's just, what am I learning as a coach and individual with the people I'm working on and what I'm doing? How do I put that into a better program? And how do I communicate that to people better? So there's 3 different areas of going on. There's what you do for an online business servicing clients. There's what you do for an in-person business to make money and pay bills to service in-person clients, which they can have a lot of corollary. But then you have to go and be full-time marketer. Can I make compelling
Mhm.
information? Can I make it engaging? Can I edit? Can I learn the skills of communication? Do I understand microphones and how to record things? Do I understand audio? Do I understand video and lighting? lighting. So those are all soft skills that you're learning by doing. And when you start to learn
Yeah.
that game, you can then pair an expertise in the domain with the capacity to tell a compelling story. Ooh, that's interesting. And that's few and far between, which is why you very rarely see people that are in both categories, because it's a lot of learning to do all that stuff. So that was what I was taking a hit on the money to buy myself my time back. And again, it wasn't like, 10 grand is still great per month. I'm never complaining about that. That was a fun time. Unfortunately, I got married really young when I was 21, and my wife, then my ex-wife now, had moved out right at the beginning of COVID. So I was just like,
Mm.
I'm 2 years, I'm going to be a bachelor phase. And I was like, I'm not going to date. I'm not going to do any dating apps. I'm just going to figure out this stuff, learn social media skills, and just learn and work and just develop my capacity. And it paid off after about 2 years. And so then when I had those things, I was like, I could continue to be a big fish in this little pond back in Raleigh relative to like my house, my gym, these things and my clients. Or I could go and really learn some of the stuff. And so I moved out here, and I didn't have the same filming support. One of my best buds that films everything. And I still film some things and travel, but I realized there's a humility of like, all right, there's a lot more I need to learn. There's a spiral capacity of learning. So you start off, you learn something, and you start with the feet, and then you go learn about like hips and mobility, or like you learn a modality of something that you didn't understand, or you learn about fascia. And then your message gets really complex because you're learning so much more. And then when you really understand it, it gets simple again. And then you go with these cycles, these spiraling cycles and so the problem is social media values things that are simple. It's like walking through a jungle. That's colored, that's loud, that's bright. Those are things that I'm looking for. Everything else is green. And so the more complex I got as an individual, and the more I was trying to learn things, the less I tracked on social media. So when I was overconfident and really simple on the feet, we're gonna fix the feet, we're gonna do this stuff, simple message, people love it. When you start to understand, well, actually, it's not it's not just the feet, there's the body, there's fascia, there's connective tissue, there's all this stuff moving. That doesn't fit as well into a reel. So you have to be willing to take the hit in order to go around that loop again and go on another process. You have to be willing to take, I'm not going to get as much hits on my content. I'm not going to sell as much, which means I'm not going to have enough money. So can I lower my burn rate? So when I moved out, I went fully online. But that fully online was, I'm going 100% into, I still sell programs, but I make a few $1,000s a month. But it was more of like, I'm treating this like I'm going to graduate school. I'm going to go to graduate school. I'm going to learn. I'm going to study. I'm going to really ask questions, travel, be around whatever it is. I'm driving my same 10-year-old car. It doesn't really matter. But you develop such an internal capacity to refine your skills of speaking, presentation, videography, lighting, etc., and your capacity to understand and tell a story. And so that's what I realized is a unique position for me. Is my entire business model is selling things online. And over the last year, I switched over to a school. There's different ways you organize the programs, and I've had more or less success with more complex and less complex methods. But right now, simple membership, low cost monthly thing, and you buy programs within that. That's been 8 months, but in the last year, and that's been enough to pay the bills. But it's in service of a bigger journey, which is I'm writing this book. It'll come out and be published next year, which is really the culmination. And so, like, what I'm getting at is that it's an individual journey, but there are universal themes, and these universal themes require sacrificing what is comfortable in the moment. So it's not like I have this riches of all these, all this money. It's like there's a journey of what I think I can work towards that I'm growing on that doesn't lend itself to a long-term successful business model in the time. But everybody I've seen that's been successful, I assume, and I've talked to, either I know or as I can see the pattern of this journey of willing to be let go of the comfortable in service of learning something greater, even if it means not being able to play the short-term status games of like, look how successful I am.
Yeah. What is your long-term mission?
That's I've been working with a coach to really codify that. The closest I've come to a very quippy statement is to help people see themselves clearly, which is ironic because my eyesight was never great. And so like there's not lost on me in some capacity, but in some capacity, like in some truth, I really want to up in the physical therapy industry. Like there's, unfortunately, I think that we are due for in the health space, whether that's as far as surgery to medical interventions, to physical therapy, to orthopedics, to chiropractic, all the way to just general fitness, to weight loss, to elite performance. These now have been presented as silos, individual silos on like 10 to 12 different matrices you could think of. They are the same spectrum. And when people think of them as silos, they feel disempowered. They don't understand that. So the real point of this book that I'm working on is to create a compelling story that overcomes your objections, that helps you understand the body in a succinct, meaningful story that doesn't use fancy Latin words or large descriptive terms that you need to go to school to understand physiology and anatomy, like that helps you find a purpose and a mission and a reason for this compelling compelling health that is available to you, teaches you the steps to unlock your faster, teaches the way to move in these global patterns, teaches you the basic athletic skills to go, and then understands the general pattern of how to apply this in life. That's a 7-part process of the book with no, again, a 5th grade level or less in terms of writing difficulty, with no no Latin. I want people to feel empowered and to feel this. You are a body that is a consistent unit. And so whether that's upending physical therapy, overhauling or reconnecting and reinvigorating the fitness value, but I don't know exactly what those words are, but it's like there's something that is due for a meaningful story that pulls people into a sense of connectedness with their health. We've never been so unhealthy and disconnected, and our health span is just shrinking every year, and it just can't go on forever. And I think it's unfortunate because people look at things like fertility, body weight, skin issues, digestive health, mental capacity. I know it firsthand. My dad's got Parkinson's and mom's early onset Alzheimer's. It's like, but people feel like these things are out of their control. They feel like they're waiting up. My knee, a guy talked last night, talking about he had hip surgery. He's like, yeah, the doctor says I'm gonna have to have a replacement in 10, 15 years.
And you're like, and that's got to grate at you. Like,
yeah, like, what? That doctor, did he do your tax? If he can see that far in the future, you should let him do your stocks and your investments too. Because like people don't feel like they have an active role to play in their body. And I think that's such a shame. So it's like, I don't have the exact words for it, but part of the reason I'm writing the book is like, as I get another 4 or 5 months of and finish the first draft, I'm going to have there's this level of, you get this editing process of looking back to what is this thing, but really is this capacity of you're meant for more and you have autonomy and control over your body. Like, I really think that's what people are missing, in a sense of control and autonomy in their life. And so that's really the mission, is like, whatever you want to do, go do it. I don't but I want you to not be hindered by the self-limiting beliefs and pain and disease, because it's optional.
I love that, Graham. And whenever that book's completed, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Again on the show. Do a part 2.
That'd be great. I love it. The goal is the first draft. I mean, I'm finished. I'm on chapter 3 of 7 now. I got the whole thing outlined, but it'll be end of March will be the first I get everything done, pulled together. So it's a lot of editing, a lot of refining, but it's fun. It's good because it helps you articulate. But yeah.
Do you envision an element of your future brand and business empire including any form of in-person coaching?
Yeah, that's what I gotta say is the loneliest part about doing online stuff, and people don't appreciate this, but it's pretty lonely because I have full capacity of my time. I go and exercise and work out, and I got friends in my jujitsu and guys that see at the gym and stuff like that. But I really like working with people because it's so easy to just help someone see something and feel something when you're there in person. And there's a level of that which is a real challenge to put that into words and articulate it. We're planning to move in the next year somewhere more back east, and that would be a goal, is to open up a space to have people come and train and do that stuff, whether it's workshops or things like that. I really do like working on meeting people because there's deep conversations you can have. But that's the way I try to think about it is, what do I have the opportunity right now, both as an individual and just in terms of I have a low enough cost of life that the money I'm making online with little to no extra effort is because I can get my social media posts and my blog scheduled one day of the week, and then I have 6 days of the week to do whatever else I want. What is the opportunity there? And it's not just, oh, let me just screw around and watch TV. It's like, no, there's something that is uniquely here that I have an opportunity to do, that if I do this will open up new doors. And that I think is like, let me use this to really articulate a meaningful vision. And then after I have the book out that presents that, then go, travel, meet people, and pull it into let's go and bring this fruition into the world. So there's this Jordan Peterson had this thought, these 4 layers of life, and I kind of put it in these succinct words, like is, act, think, say. By that I mean, it's it's a level of hierarchical organization. So is like just all the atoms that are in the world. They're just kind of unformed matter. And then the things that get formed into action, like a table stands up against gravity. There's an action against gravity. So there's a formation that gets held together. So an action, I move. There is. If I didn't know you at all, I could look at you. Well, let's just say we found an animal. We could probably tell pretty quick, okay, do you think the animal flies? Do you think it swims? Do you think it runs? Do you think it, how do you think it eats? By looking at it. And so the motions, the actions of what it is present some form. So a step above all the base level atoms is the things that they are formed. And so that formation, that form tells something about it. Now, the next level above that is a conscious awareness of that. And that's sensation, identifying a smell, seeing a sight, seeing an object, and informing and creating this, of the millions, if not billions or trillions of thoughts and perceptions you have that flow through your mind all day. It's really hard to put those into words. It's like having a dream, for example. you're conscious
Yes.
of something, but it's you wake up. I had this dream where I did this thing, and like there was a person, and then they like they ran. And I was, and it's like we lose all words for it. So the highest
Yeah.
level of awareness and to most understand is to put it into words and to articulate. And so I think that's why
Mm.
words are so valuable and powerful. This idea of I just finished watching Harry Potter, and this idea I had is clear speech is powerful speech because mumbled spells cast no magic. You can't mumble it and say it wrong; it's not going to work. And so the idea is like, is act or is form think say, like is act think say, when you can put something into words, it's the highest level of you label it. That is a thing. For example, analogy for the Bible, God brings Adam all the animals and has him label them. It's like, what is it? You speak forth something. And so it's interesting. Is a rose by any other name still as sweet? This is Shakespeare. But
Mm.
then it's not just enough to say that. Then there's an unfolding of that. Like there's an arc of this, which is once you said it, now you truly can reflect on the thing because the speech is an act that it forms in and of itself. You can reflect on what was said. If you read something, like, well, what does that mean? And I try to understand it. And that happens both from if I go and let's just say I write a book, there's all this stuff, there's my body, let me understand that and bring in conscious awareness and put it into words and trying to articulate that. Then I put that out there. You go and say, that is. And so then it changes you, but on the other, so something is for you, then you act on the new language and then you understand it and then you describe and add to it. So you stand on the shoulders of giants, and that's the progression of life. So you see this tidal wave of people, but in the individual person, there's for me to go and understand and to articulate it, then to really say, in the light of this thing that I've now figured out, how should I understand the world? Because this thing, there's a world, I turn on the flashlight, the light shines something. There's something new to be perceived. And so what
Yeah.
it is that I have thought of and like that has popped into this that I've been able to articulate now changes the fabric of what is out. I have to understand that. Then I act in accordance to that, and then it changes reality. So there's this arc in a sense where both you picking up the baton and taking it from the last person who did the 4x4 and you're on the third leg, you're going to finish the race, is the thing they say becomes the new basis of your information. For example, you're
Mm.
living your entire life because of what somebody said when you were 13. Here's orthotics because you have bad feet, and then you learn something new. Oh wow, I'm learning on my feet could, and so you take this idea of fascia and then or whatever your fascia in your feet, and you run with it, and now it creates a new understanding of your body, and that plays in a tiny little part in what your overall message is. And so that's why I think the act of writing a book is like really, if you sat down, and I don't think everybody's compelled to do it, maybe, but I think a lot of people I know that are thinkers and start on the process of creation have some path of writing a book or something like that. It's really summarizing what it is, your autobiography. What is your life? What have you thought
Yeah.
about? What have
Yeah.
you learned? What is your Q minus your N equals one test? And I think there's something about that which is your voice matters, and that gives a collective baton. And if everybody's taking the baton in their own field, you move the field forward. But as an individual, you have to do both sides of the arc because we all die. I'm going to die. And so there's a level of, I can't just continue to always, the only thing that grows forever is cancer. And we don't like that. So like, there's a level of once I get all the point where I've said this thing, now what if the first arc of your life is to figure out what your warrior message is? Like you go through, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the boyhood, cowboy, warrior. There's John Eldridge's great 5-stage processes: boyhood, cowboy, warrior, king, sage, wisdom. And so there's other
Mm.
archetypes or versions of that. But the idea is like this arc of like a life. The warrior message is a thing that the sword you're going to bring to the world and change, make a difference. And then like the king, where you preside over this is like living in
Mhm.
accordance with that. And then the sages where you reflect on this and you pass on that information. But by the time you get to be the elder, that sage is no longer about you. You've almost removed yourself
Yeah.
from it. Like, I don't need a lot of
Yeah.
food. I don't need a lot of this. You live, more meekly in some sense, but you're just commenting on this. The king, the presiding phase is like, how do you live in accordance with this thing? And so the warrior phase is really, can you articulate and bring it into a weapon? Can you make this into a weapon, a word that is a weapon that you can go and forth and make change in the world? And then once you've done
Mm.
that, do you have the humility to live in accordance with that which you say is true? And it's like there's an emotional change at each level that isn't, from that really inspires me on this. Like it helps me have a business model for my life, in a sense, a model to think about what it is that I'm working. That does not always translate to money at every point, but it inspires me to go through as like a mission. It's like, okay, I don't know what my, cute little, I'm going to help like Bajors Cooley and I'm going to open up 1,000 fit body boot camp locations. It's like, maybe, but it's like so many things we
Mm.
say are placeholders for the real thing. But you see Bajors Cooley now, he's really focused on like helping men grow up. And there's a level of that,
Yeah.
which is you don't understand till afterwards. And so I think
Yeah.
sometimes people sell themselves, you do something, but there's a process of like stumbling through messily while you're doing it the first time, but you're led by a conviction and intuition. And that is like, I don't know where this is going to go, but it's got me where I am so far. And for better or worse, I don't know what else to follow. And I think that's, to me, what it means to be faithful.
Well, I love it. It sounds to me, and I don't know if you would agree with it. Would you say you're in your warrior stage?
I think there's different ways to think about that. Every cell in your body regenerates every 7 years. And so you kind of think about, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. But I think that like you could start wherever you are. It doesn't really in that. But I think that there's these real big processes of remodeling yourself every 7 years. But I firmly feel like I'm about halfway through that where I'm really getting articulation and doing that. And then for me lining up with like, typically having family and kids puts you in the next thing. But that's really where I'm at now is like articulating and putting it into like an invigorating message that you go forth and like, and you
Yeah.
tell me you can name anybody you think of as a successful person on social media and you can see the archetype of he didn't know them, but they spent the 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the cowboy phase. Really, boyhood is where at least this is for men. I can't speak for women, but you
Yeah.
learn the edges of you're with your father, you learn your edges or a father figure, and you learn the edges of masculinity and like what it means to be a man. You kind of like you're around, you're looking up to everybody. The cowboy phase is where you learn a little bit of a craft. You start to spend the 5, 10 years of like learning a skill. You become Jesus was a carpenter. You look at Confucius and the Buddha, they all have different like periods of time where they like spent time learning a thing, a skill, using their hands, applying their body, and the emotional journey
Mhm.
with that. And then there's a warrior phase where they go forth and they speak in this like it's not like they're trying to let's start wars per se, but they are saying something that is in conflict with some lesser truth. Whatever they're cutting, they found something that is true and they're using their thing, and so that creates this process.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
It feels like Bruce Lee, right? Just like what was the way of the intercepting fist, Jeet Kune Do? Like
Oh
this is
yeah.
my stance,
Yeah.
right? Very controversial in the martial arts world.
But then they live, and so then do you have the humility to live in accordance, or will you be a hypocrite? And so I think there's a level of
Right.
constant refining and being able to work on that. And so the thing is that nobody nails it, nobody gets it perfectly right. And so even in that, there's a humility that's required, like you're presiding over. But like you look at there's a reason Marcus Aurelius gets hailed as like one of the greatest philosopher kings of, or one of the greatest leaders, or if not the greatest, one like a philosopher king, is because he was willing to, even though he had power. And when I think with the king phase, you develop there's this power, whether that's power over your
Yeah.
kids and a family, power over business, power over others that follow, whatever it is. And we make the mistake of judging the number of people that follow us for the righteousness or the strength of the message, so to speak, or the goodness of the person. But any of that power, there's a level of like, will you be humble enough to realize that there's still time, you can still learn. There's still seasons of life, and there's always fractals that within this thing that you're not like, it's not just because you're the king doesn't mean you don't learn. And so we look to the person who is willing to be a servant leader. It's like those two things seem controversial, but you realize it's like it's the masculine and feminine dichotomy. It's like it's
Yeah.
the yin and yang. There's these things that mirror with one another, and it's the inability to see the other within you and know the necessity of the other end of that is like so the warrior in the garden kind of thing. It's like you being able to do that. So there's levels of that, but that's kind of I think you would be hard pressed to find anybody in the social media, and I think the social media is the modern day democracy. It just shows what people are really voting
Mhm.
for in terms of like who they follow, whether it's YouTube, whatever it is. It's like there's a clarity with which they've owned the message and they live in alignment with it over long term, because not everybody does. But social media is like the first draft of a popularity thing, but then it's like it takes time for a lot of these things to be borne out. But you look at people, Hermosi, I think he's a great, he's bringing in a real message of simplicity to business. There's a lot of, and they move forward, and so I think that's something interesting.
Well, I dream of the day when, whether or not this is in your future, I dream of the day when I'd be able to walk into a barefoot sprinter optimized training concept. Same thing for Ben Patrick and ATG.
Well, Ben's working on that. He's got his ATG gyms, and like there is a cost. There's different personality types, and different people have some capacity, and it may change. But I guess the question is, what would you think that would be?
All I know is that, so you touched on the dance between creativity and editing. When I first discovered Ben Patrick and later you, I was compelled by this desire to have an incarnate experience with an experienced coach who understands your methodology deeply and other humans that I can train alongside. And this is because the
Yeah.
greatest advances I've ever experienced in my own athletic journey came when I was training with contemporaries who were also aligned and moving in the same direction, and with someone who understood the system and could lead us as a group. And those were the most fun experiences. And those were where I saw the biggest jumps in ability. And so, like, how would it look? I don't know exactly how it would look, Graham.
That is what I really would love. And that's one of the things, just to dote on my wife for a moment. One of the things I really love about her is she's just very open to the idea of hospitality and wants to really help people. And I would love, I think that if those who are blessed with financial opportunity, there's an opportunity to serve in that. And so like, in some sense, if I keep working on this path and there's an opportunity to be blessed with financial income, then it's like, I want to use that to open up a place where there's like a kick-ass gym and a space where people come and stay. And like, I'd love to do like a week or 2 week training camps where you come in and you train training, you work, and like you have food and community, and like that is like a very felt strong desire in the near future to have that. And what it would look like is we sprint, sandbags, play juggle, we do different sports, we wrestle, like there's things like
Yeah,
that. You go
man.
through this
Yeah, man.
capacities, like there'll be an experience of what it's like to be alive. That's what I would want to have. And it's not a there's a difference like people often look for a religion, and I think you see this in the functional patterns, what they do with these are the good movements, these are the ones we don't do. ATG to a certain degree, which is like these are the knee essentials, and they work to give people a guideline to work on. There's nothing wrong with that
Scaffolding.
whatsoever. It's just
Yeah.
scaffolding. The thing is that like within that, I'm always worried because once you put too much faith into the scaffolding itself, you forget that the scaffolding just surrounds an edifice. It's like if we
Yes.
think about it, we get so used to the scaffolding that goes. You ever seen one of those buildings, the old ancient churches or the Capitol building or something like that? A
Yeah.
scaffolding around it. We like start
Notre
worshiping the
Dame.
scaffolding. This is the corner I turn on. And it's like we forget that no, there's a thing inside of this. And that's what like I really
Yeah.
focus on. So I find myself almost at every turn like really trying to deflect like what is the thing, what's the point here. And
Yes.
I mean the pain is there's no better example of that than pain, because you look at why does something hurt in your body why that day and that you've been wearing barefoot shoes for 2 years, why that day on that sprint on that step on that foot. It's like we don't think about this because well it's just whatever, just the straw that broke the camel. It may have been the thing, but it's like we don't know that. And instead we can look and say what if there's wisdom in the body. And I think this draws in an Eastern perspective, and you look at the way traditional Chinese energy medicine and the energy and moving around the body. I don't understand all that stuff, but I try to be humble enough to at least admit that I can't say it's wrong. And I've had too many experiences where like a pain has connected with some part of the body that is a direct lesson. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the thing to learn. We all kind of get that, right? We're like, oh, I was in a bad relationship. I just, finally learned the lesson. It's like we get that there are things we can learn from the things that happen to us, and yet we don't apply that same wisdom to our body in the same way. And I think part of that is because you didn't choose to be your skin color and ethnicity in the same way I did. And so we kind of think of that
Mhm.
skin level as like, well, I didn't choose to be 6'2", and I didn't choose to have 10 fingers. But so there's a level of things we didn't choose, right? And so there's a little because of that things we're not choosing, we then feel as though that compares to like other things. But if we instead looking at the things we can't choose and say, what if there's a thing to learn from the momentum of this stuff? And we start to then question, what is me? What is the part of me that plays hockey? And what's the part of me that really wants to play that track? And I think so many of the things that happen in people's lives go to these moments where you have a reflection point, an inflection point about the thing you were doing and the thing you want to do. And that requires change and sacrifice and difference and discomfort and something new and being a long time of being uncomfortable where you don't know what you're doing. But those people, those are always the turning points in their life. And so the editing of your life and looking back with the pain, when the pain, the stiffness, and where it is in your body tells you when something's going, something's like you're just starting to stray a little bit from where, like I've heard it said that your destiny is the free will of your higher self. I don't know how true that is, but it's the idea of if there was a self that subconsciously knows where you could, like, what is just best. Like, that's a good smell. I like the way that person smells. I don't like the way that person smells. You just trust your gut, your intuition. You start to realize that, there's a predisposition for the things that you're interested in that you didn't necessarily choose. But it
Yeah.
takes time to figure out what's the difference between an intuition and an impulse is. Like it takes time to figure those
Mm.
things out. And so, this constant editing and refining process leads you to a point where you can start to say, maybe my shoulder is hurting because I'm always doing this thing and it's not really good. And I don't know why I do that thing in the first place. And maybe if I thought about it differently, I just changed the way I approached it, it would be a little bit better, which is essentially no different than do this different movement to fix your shoulder. AKA the framework you have laid on top of your movement and your existent being for whatever unnamed, unknowable, subconscious reason. If you just change that a little bit, you would take the pressure off of your joints and your body would stop hurting. It's like that is physical therapy, but it's no different than just awareness of your body and using your body as a guide, which then really helps people feel like, oh, I know exactly what to do with my life because my body will tell me. And that's a beautiful relationship to be best friends with
Mm.
your body, because now you have a guide that is something that has evolved over, countless years of variations and wisdom of like, you're not alone in the world because you have the ultimate blueprint, It's like we all have the blueprint to our life, but we just never were taught how to read it. It's like such a shame.
Yeah. Do you have a vision for how your book, and maybe it's more than just the book, but I'll say the book because you're working on that right now, how that actually could upend the physical therapy industry? Is that even the right? Is it an industry? I'll say industry. I don't know what other word to call it.
Fortunately, that's the problem, is it is an industry. Like that's the problem with the medical product industry,
Mhm.
the medical, it's like they're industries. The people make money. It's like, it's just, and there was that unfortunate assassination of the CEO of that
Yeah.
insurance provider. And it's like, by no means is that a condoned thing, or is that you can't describe the loss of those kids. They don't know who he is, what he does. They just lost their dad. And so it's horrible. And it's
Mhm.
like the fact that people, though, are able to find anything other than true, like sadness of that tragedy points to the fact that there's this like disconnect between a sense of control in their life versus what they think is taking that from them. And so you start to see this, the
Yeah.
fact that there are industries around healthcare and insurance. And like, of course, I'm not saying people shouldn't be paid for their time and energy and do this, but it's like the burden we've put on these different areas of healthcare has outstripped any ability to have like the handling of it. So when I think
Yeah.
about that, it's like the hardest part of it is it's not like you don't attack the physical therapy industry by attacking physical therapists. They're great people. I've
No,
met
no, no.
many. They are
Yep.
phenomenal and they're so knowledgeable. And but you gotta like if you can start to help people, you have to like waking up so from the shoe orthotic thing. If you can start to point to the fact that like the way you've been taught how to handle, like I've had many podiatrists that message me and say the first line of defense they were taught in school is this is orthotic. And so when you stop thinking of yourself as an ophthalmologist, it's like you start to realize that like you help people see, you don't just sell glasses. Well, you're a podiatrist. You help people feel and
Mhm.
walk and move. And
Mhm.
podiatrists should be focused on locomotion. It's no better person to talk about feet and locomotion than a podiatrist, but yet they are orthotic salesmen. So there is a dark and a light path, which is you can use tools to help you. But the thing is, if you're only taught how to be a salesman, you never learn how to be a healer. You never learn how to be an educator. And so shifting the role from you're not a physical therapist, you're you help people understand myofascial, like a massage therapist, a physical therapist, a chiropractor. They really are like, they're working the same thing. The chiropractic is a little bit different, obviously more joint manipulation. But like, if you thought about massage therapists and tissue therapists and physical therapists as like educators, this is
One.
your body, this is your tissue. They teach about
Yeah.
fascia. And if you thought about a podiatrist as a locomotion expert, and you thought about an ophthalmologist as someone who helps people see, you see how they become more engaged as they don't go into an industry just because it's safe, because insurance pays for it. They go into it because I get to help people live. And I think the
Mhm.
people that are called to that really feel that at one point, but then
Yes.
they're taught and beat out of them over the span of 3 to 5 or 6 years in professional school. And then they become glorified salesmen, but they don't realize it because you can't depend on a man to understand that which his salary depends on him not understanding. And so you change it by getting people to see themselves as educators as opposed to fixers. I don't fix you. I don't apply a scaffold and fix you. It's like we can use tools, but it has to be done in a way that's really engaged. That only happens if there's no insurance, because insurance has to productize people. So there's multiple, there's other aspect, but the insurance, the layer that goes on top of like the middleman of insurance, they are the ones that they prioritize for the Latin names. They have to say what tour. Now, if I'm going to be an insurance adjustment that's going to go in and assess the flood damage of your house, I have to say, what's the square footage? What type of material was on the ground? How much water was there? What's the humidity? I have to know facts. I have to know numbers. But you
Mhm.
don't get that with humans, unless you say, what are the blood test matters? How much we say people's going to live? What's the value of someone's life? And you start to see this is like the layering of a productization on people takes a square, an area of nature and turns it into a plot of land. Oh, you see how we just
Mhm.
took, you fly over and see with this farming, you see this whole nature and this natural craziness of curving lines and this just like fractal nature of the stuff. And then you see, oh, squares and circles and plotted lands, which is this very like, binary way of thinking about it in this kind of limited right or left brain construction of like, oh, that's 500 acres. And it's like, that's not nature. And so same thing with people. But then there's another layer, which is really the only way you can start, is you have to get people to take autonomy and care about themselves. And I think there's this deep question: is do people not know, or do they not care? Like, and I think that defies a lot of what people perceive around the world. It's like you get people that say, you know what, they just don't know. And there's people you have empathy, like that person, if they knew better, they would do better. And so I can have empathy for people. And then there's other people that say they don't know, they just don't care, they're just an asshole, they could do better, they're lazy, they're whatever. And so you see, we can't know anybody's true disposition, but we can choose to believe, well, they either don't know or they don't care. The hard part is it's somewhere in the middle. People do know. There are people that just don't. There are things that they don't know. And there's sometimes they just don't care because they choose to be lazy. And it's tough because there's a line of personal responsibility, which is you don't have to know everything, but you know what one degree of a better step would be for you. It's like, you don't have to know what the most saint-like activity you could do, but you know that it's not good to kill somebody. Like, so it's
Mhm.
like there's a level of you develop a sense of control and autonomy that the way you live your life makes a difference in this life and for you and your family and for community, and the people depend on you. It's like that team environment. Like you like to be with other people and connect in the community. Say the way you have, and that's why crises bring people together. Wars and stuff like that, as terrible as they are, they give people a purpose and a combine in a brotherhood and a friendship and a community. So, there's a
Mhm.
level of that which helps people get over their own self-consciousness and their insecurity and their anxiety. So I really try to, the point of the book is like, I want to educate you on a real person to person level and give you what you need to know so that you do know. You'll know the things you need to know. And then we can have a conversation of what's going on. Like, why do you feel not even that it's there? I mean, sometimes like I feel this myself. There's sometimes I just want to be lazy and I don't want to do it. But like if I think deeply underneath those times are I'm feeling overwhelmed with something else. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling like I can't make a difference. I feel like it doesn't matter. And so, but those conversations you can have you don't know conversations one to many. You can only have you don't care conversations one to one because those are really like let's what's going on like where because once someone like shines a light into that, then all of a sudden it's like you feel alive. And so if I can do my part to remove the you don't know of the equation, which I feel like I have a unique role to be able to do, then that's my
Mhm.
job. It's like help people educate. And then, in so much as life provides them meaning, whether they have kids, whether they get married, they have a challenge in their family, whatever it is that like really forces them to action, then they can start to like bring their own meaning to it. Like it's what I'm saying is you don't know why your feet hurt. We can fix that. I don't necessarily care how fast you run or if you want to go be a ice hockey or do track, but it's like that's for you to bring your own purpose to your life and listen to your body. And your body will guide you on that path. I just want you to feel like you have some power to live to that. So like I really refined to it. Like upending these industries has to happen, from a political, financial, incentive, corporate
Yeah.
level, which is it's almost impossible to start from. But grassroots that changes how people how the practitioners go, and then what the people think is optional. And if no one has ever heard that you can fix your feet without orthotics, they'll never think it's an option. So as much as I can try to pull that of like this is a new way of seeing your body, that I think is the job like would be the value of the book and the value of it. If I don't think you get too many big things to chew off in a warrior phase or life, and so that would be the thing that worthwhile for me.
Well, Graham, I absolutely love your message. I love the enlightenment and the common sense that you're bringing to the health and wellness industry. I hope, and this is the reason I'm doing the podcast, and this is the reason I'm currently in a creative phase trying to figure out exactly how I do this. But I was struck when I left personal training 13 years ago now that I think I have an ability to identify things that work. I'm not a creator. That's not what I do. Think
That's
so.
a relative term. We could argue about that, but carry on.
Okay, yeah, well, hear me out. Hear me out. I create things. I am a creative person, but I feel like what I'm best at is curation.
Mm,
And when I saw what Ben was doing and what you're doing, it's like this shit needs to be everywhere. And it needs to be everywhere, not just digitally. It needs to be experiential everywhere. And that takes a
yeah.
lot of capital, it takes a lot of coordination, takes a lot of processes and systems. And it's a very different thing. It's a very different thing. But like the way I feel, it should be as ubiquitous as Starbucks or Chipotle. Like there should not be a major city on earth where you can't go into and get a high quality premium in-person experience that liberates people's bodies. And like your message did not exist, you really started coming onto the scene, 2015, 16, maybe even more recently than that. So let's say 10 years ago, like you couldn't find Barefoot Sprinter, right? 10
Yeah.
years from now, there'll be someone else that we don't know. So the message will continue to evolve, but you are really on to something that needs to be scaled. And I don't know
Mm.
how that's going to work. Don't care at this moment, but I'm really happy that I've had a chance to speak with you, to meet you, and I'm rooting for you. I want to see how far you can go.
I appreciate you. People that are patient and give me the opportunity to verbally process as I ramble help me get one step closer to that. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Are there any causes or charities that you want to shout out, things that really are close to your heart that people should be aware of?
One thing I really like the Innocence Project, and you have to keep up with these things, but like criminal justice reform, I think that's really valuable. But there's Josh Dubin and those guys. I really have. That's been the last like charity that I've either supported. But broadly speaking, what I've really dug into is I'll say there's two things, and there's one cheesy. It's like real friendships and like personal responsibility. And so it's not to say that it's like there are friends in your life that are dying to have real conversations. And rather than, I think the problem with money is that people use it at like, they use it to write a check and make there's a conscious, like, clean a guilty conscience in
Mhm.
right away. And I think that's like the real value of sweat is exactly what makes you uncomfortable. And what I've noticed over and over again is the people that suffer just don't have friends. And I have very blessed with two or three really amazing friends that I call daily. I've already talked to one of them like I'll call once or two times every single day, and we talk about whatever's going on. Like, and the people that and he lives in a different state. We stay on top of it. And the people you see, It's the people you work with that, like, if you just start to have some real conversations, whether you're reading a book and say, hey, I'm reading this book, you want to like talk, if people really focused on making 2025 where they focus on developing one really good friend, like a true friend that you hide nothing from, like literally. I and my buddies, we've had arguments, we've gotten mad at each other, we've had like disconnects and times where we're like, but we just always like I will never hide anything from each other. And it's like you treat your friends like you would your partner. And it's like there's
Mhm.
that level of like, if you can develop one good friend like that in 2025, that would be the single best thing you could do for your life, bar none. And the
Mhm.
other half of that equation is personal responsibility, which is like when so much it comes to the thing that you could do it. Like that's the thing is like I hate to throw the word laziness around because it's very loaded with this, but like there are times like personally I know it's like I'm just I don't want to get in the car like, and it's just like that is a nature. There's a friction that always wants to seek, and it's not you. It's there's the resistance, as Stephen Pressfield would say. It's like just take the personal responsibility to be the type of person that would want to be friends with, that you would want to be friends with. And so I think maybe that's really the culmination is like make it your goal in 2025 to make one friend you hide nothing from and be the person
Mhm.
that person want to be friends with. Be interesting. Read books to have something to talk about. Listen to podcasts. Be the person that can be interesting. It's like and put that energy into one really good friend. I promise you that friendship, if you're in a romantic relationship, you're married, or that friendship will make your marriage better. That friendship will make
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
professional life better. It'll make your creative better. It'll give you. It's just I would be nothing without my friends. I can't say that more strongly. And so like just if there's one cause, it's make a friend, be a friend.
I love that, Graham. There's so much wisdom in that. Where can people find you? All the places.
At the Barefoot Sprinter everywhere and the barefootsprinter.com. So, or
Beautiful.
barefootsprinter.com.
Thank you so much. That's it.
My
That's a
pleasure.
wrap.